Let us be honest, if someone today told you that 50,000 fully equipped soldiers were about to march 1,000 miles in just 30 days, you'd probably assume they were talking about trains, trucks, or maybe an entire air force. Ancient Rome. Nope, just a bunch of guys wearing sandals. At least, that's what everyone likes to imagine. The funny thing is, Hollywood has completely ruined our image of Roman soldiers. Every movie shows them marching dramatically through dusty fields, looking exhausted, stopping every few miles to give an inspiring speech. Reality, the Romans would be left at that. To them, marching wasn't some heroic cinematic moment. It was paperwork, it was routine, it was Monday, because while other kingdoms were still trying to figure out how to feed an army for a week, Rome had already turned warfare into something much scarier. A logistics company, think about it. Winning battles is impressive. Winning battles hundreds of miles away from her. Now that's terrifying. An army doesn't just need swords. It needs bread, water, boots, replacement boots, thousands of mules, blacksmiths, doctors, engineers, carpenters, and somehow enough food to feed 50,000 men every single day. That's not an army anymore, that's basically a moving city. Except the city refuses to pay taxes and occasionally conquers your country. So how did Rome actually do it? How did they move an entire army across mountains, rivers, forests, and hostile territory faster than almost anyone else in the ancient world? The answer isn't stronger soldiers, it isn't tougher generals. And it definitely isn't magic. It has organization, the kind of organization that would make modern project managers cry tears of happiness. Because Rome didn't simply build an army, they built a system. And that system changed history forever. Let us start with something surprisingly boring. Roads. Yeah, roads. Not exactly the exciting answer you expected. No giant secret weapon, no mythical technology, just roads. But here's the catch. Roman roads weren't designed so people could go on vacation. They existed for one reason: war. Every stone was placed with soldiers in mind. Straight lines, solid foundations, drainage systems, bridges, reliable surfaces that stayed usable even after heavy rain. Imagine trying to invade a country while your enemy is walking through knee-deep mud. Meanwhile, Roman legions are casually marching down what looks suspiciously like an ancient highway. That's not luck, that's planning. And Rome built over 250,000 miles of roads throughout the empire. Read that again, 250,000 miles, around 50,000 of those were paved. In an age where most people struggled to build a decent village path. It is almost unfair. The famous saying all roads led to Rome wasn't originally about tourism. It was military strategy if trouble appeared anywhere in the empire. Rome wanted an army to arrive before the rebellion even had time to celebrate. And usually it did. But roads alone don't move armies. People do, and Roman soldiers weren't ordinary people. The average legionary carried somewhere between 60 and 90 pounds of equipment. Now imagine putting on a heavy backpack, fill it with camping gear, food, water, tools, weapons, armor, a shovel, maybe throw in a few bricks for fun. Then walk 20 miles, tomorrow, do it again. Most of us would start negotiating with our chiropractor before lunch. Roman soldiers, they called it training. In fact, many recruits spent months marching before they were considered ready for combat. Not fighting, marching, because Rome understood something that many armies ignored. If your soldiers arrive exhausted, you've already lost. Discipline wasn't just about following orders. From their capital in Anatolia, the Hittites controlled one of the strongest kingdoms on earth. They fought wars, signed treaties, and competed with Egypt for influence. Farther west, the Mycenaean Greeks built impressive citadels protected by enormous stone walls. Their palaces became centers of administration and trade. Across the eastern Mediterranean, wealthy cities prospered through commerce. Ships constantly moved between ports carrying valuable cargo. The world was rich. The world was connected, and the world was stable, or at least it appeared to be. Because beneath the surface, problems were already beginning to grow. Large populations required enormous amounts of food. Palaces demanded constant supplies. Governments became increasingly complex. Trade networks became larger and more dependent on stability. Every year, the entire system became more interconnected, and every year, it became more vulnerable. Then came the first signs that something was wrong. The climate appears to have changed. Evidence suggests that some regions suffered prolonged droughts. Harvests became smaller, food became harder to obtain. A few years of poor harvests might not destroy an empire, but repeated failures could place tremendous pressure on society. Farmers struggled to grow enough food. prices likely increased. Governments faced new challenges. At the same time, earthquakes may have struck parts of the eastern Mediterranean. Several ancient cities show evidence of destruction, others were suddenly abandoned. The world was becoming unstable, and when societies become unstable, small problems often become large ones. Trade may have become more dangerous, piracy may have increased. Migration may have accelerated, people could have left regions suffering from famine in search of better lands. Political tensions likely grew, rebellions may have erupted. Kingdoms may have fought over increasingly scarce resources. One crisis created another, and another, and another. The system that had taken centuries to build was beginning to crack. Yet the people living through these events probably did not realize how serious the situation had become. After all, great civilizations had survived difficulties before. Empires had endured wars and droughts. Kings had overcome disasters. Surely this crisis would pass as well, but this time was different, because several problems may have been happening at the same time. And when enough pressures strike a complex society simultaneously, even the strongest civilizations can fail. Then came one of the greatest mysteries in ancient history. The appearance of the Sea Peoples. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions describe mysterious groups arriving by land and sea. Their origins remain unknown, their identities remain debated. Even today, historians continue to argue about who they were. Were they invaders, refugees, mercenaries, families escaping famine? Or perhaps all of these at once? Nobody knows. What we do know is that they appeared during one of the most chaotic periods in ancient history. And shortly afterward, kingdoms began disappearing. The mighty Hittite Empire suddenly collapsed. Its capital was abandoned. Its government vanished. One of the great superpowers of the ancient world simply ceased to exist. The Mycenaean world also entered a period of decline. Palaces were deserted. Trade networks disappeared. Writing systems were forgotten. Cities that had once been wealthy and powerful were reduced to shadows of their former selves. Even Egypt, one of the strongest civilizations in history, struggled to survive the crisis. The Egyptians managed to endure, but they emerged weakened. The age of great Bronze Age empires was over. Within a remarkably short period of time, an entire international system had collapsed. The ancient world entered a dark age. For the people living through these events, it must have felt like the end of everything they knew. Imagine seeing great kingdoms vanish during your lifetime. Supply depots were built along important routes. Grain was collected from friendly provinces. Ships transported bulk cargo whenever rivers or seas were available. Local governors knew exactly what resources they had to provide. Everything was scheduled long before the first soldier even left camp. Modern militaries call this logistics. The Romans simply called it common sense. And unlike many ancient kingdoms, Rome actually had the bureaucracy to make it work. Not glamorous, not heroic. Just thousands of officials writing reports, counting grain, inspecting warehouses, recording mule numbers, and making sure someone's paperwork matched someone else's paperwork. Sounds boring. Exactly. That's why it worked. Wars are rarely won by dramatic speeches. They are won by making sure breakfast arrives on time. Speaking of breakfast, let us talk about the man carrying all this equipment. Hollywood loves showing Roman soldiers charging heroically into battle. Reality looked a little different. Most of their time wasn't spent fighting. It was marching, training, digging, repairing roads, building camps, cleaning equipment, standing guard, repeating drills, again and again and again, until every movement became instinct. Why? Because fear makes people forget. Training makes people remember. If arrows suddenly started raining from the sky, there wasn't time to think. Every shield had to move automatically. Every formation had to lock into place without discussion. Every officer had to know exactly what came next. That level of discipline didn't appear overnight. It was built one exhausting day after another. There's an old saying that amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can get it wrong. The Roman army lived by that philosophy nearly 2,000 years before anyone bothered putting it into words. Now imagine being one of Rome's enemies. You've gathered intelligence. You know the Roman army is still weeks away. Your villages feel safe. Your warriors relax. Maybe they even celebrate. Then suddenly, Roman scouts appear. How? Because Roman marches were unbelievably fast. A normal day's march covered around 15 to 20 miles. Forced marches could push much farther, and since every soldier carried his own gear, there wasn't a massive baggage train slowing everyone down. In fact, Roman soldiers earned a nickname because of it. People called them Marius mules, not exactly flattering, but incredibly effective. The nickname came after the military reforms of Gaius Marius. Instead of relying on endless servants carrying equipment, the soldiers carried much more themselves. At first, everyone hated it. Of course they did. Nobody enjoys carrying extra weight, but there was a huge advantage. The army became faster, more flexible, less dependent on vulnerable supply trains. Less likely to get stuck waiting for hundreds of wagons. Sometimes doing the harder thing today makes tomorrow much easier. The Romans figured that out long before motivational speakers started putting it on coffee mugs. Still, even the greatest system had limits. Marches weren't easy. Feet blistered, armor rubbed raw skin, rain turned roads slippery. Summer heat was brutal, winter could freeze men where they stood. Disease often killed more soldiers than enemy swords. The Roman army wasn't superhuman, it simply accepted hardship as part of the job. That's a huge difference. Other armies often stopped because conditions became difficult. Romans expected conditions to become difficult, they planned for it. And planning changes everything, because once hardship becomes expected, it loses much of its power. That's one of the biggest secrets behind Rome's military success. Not bigger muscles, not stronger weapons, not magic tactics. Nobody needed 10 meetings to decide what happened next. If you've ever worked in an office where 5 managers somehow give 6 different instructions, you already know how valuable that is. The Roman army avoided confusion because responsibility was obvious. If something failed, someone answered for it. Not the weather, not bad luck, not unexpected circumstances, someone. That level of accountability made officers extremely careful, because failure wasn't just embarrassing. Sometimes it was fatal. Now picture an enemy commander watching all of this unfold. Scouts report that Roman columns are approaching, not scattered, not disorganized, not starving. They're marching in formation. The roads behind them are usable, bridges appear where there weren't any before. Supply wagons keep arriving, fresh troops replace tired ones. And every evening another fortified camp magically appears on the landscape. At some point, you stop asking how to defeat Rome. You start asking how much surrender will cost. That psychological advantage mattered. Victories weren't won only on battlefields. Many were won long before the first sword left its scabbard. Reputation can be a weapon, and Rome spent centuries sharpening it. People feared the legions because they kept showing up, again and again and again. Lose one army, another arrives. Destroy a bridge, they build a new one. Cut a road, engineers repair it. Defeat one legion, Rome raises another. Empires aren't hard to defeat because they're invincible. They're hard to defeat because they refuse to stay there. And few civilizations demonstrated that better than Rome. The soldiers themselves became symbols of reliability. Not because every Roman was a fearless warrior, far from it. Many were terrified before battle, just like anyone else would be. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing your job despite it. The Roman military built an environment where individual fear mattered less than collective discipline. That's a powerful combination, because one frightened soldier can panic. 50,000 trained soldiers following the same routine. That's a completely different story. So, could Rome really move 50,000 soldiers 1,000 miles in just 30 days? The short answer, sometimes. The longer answer is a lot more interesting. Ancient historians loved impressive numbers. Sometimes they exaggerated, sometimes they rounded things up, and sometimes they simply wanted their favorite general to sound like the greatest military genius who had ever lived. So whenever you hear exact figures from